I'd like to introduce our two panellists here. Simon Jeffery-Bilich is the head of investments for Count and has a long track record of working within advice businesses, particularly in a research and investment context. The sorts of issues which we spoke about in the platform session are weighing on Simon's mind. And Glenn Poynton, previously with Macquarie, then in a strategic role at Class Super, and then executive director with Beta Shares, and now consulting to a number of organisations on strategic directions. So both of them bring, each from their own perspective of advice and product and platform issuance, a deep perspective on the strategic issues which advice and retail financial services face. So what I want to do is start off with a question which draws perhaps together some of the regulatory and corporate development threads. I'm going to start with you, Simon. Vertical integration, that's the creature from the dead is rising. Vertical integration, I mean, does it create value? How does it create value? What risks does it create for the organisation and more generally for us as a profession?
Look, a good question. I do hate the word vertical integration, and I'll probably come to that later, because I think it inspires the dark days of the industry, right? And my response will kind of split those apart and why. But from a value perspective, the key benefit an integrated group like ours has is the intimacy and the relationship with firms, okay? Because we understand advice, we work with them closely, and on scale, it gives us the ability to understand where their pain points are and where their opportunities are. And that filters through in a number of different ways. So for us, we own an investments business, but we also own an actuarial consulting business, a business outsourcing business, IT business. So for us, it's really about how do we customise and deliver services efficiently into those businesses that connect with them, at a far deeper level. And so it's not, it's around delivering kind of an integrated solution for their business efficiently. And if I think from the investment side, which I lead, the key value there is that because we understand advice, we're able to really work with them around what is the investment philosophy they're trying to achieve for their clients and their firms, and how does a managed account solution or any solution align to that philosophy. So it's not just off-the-shelf solution, it's not just picked from a menu, it's how do we help the advisor deliver a better client experience that aligns to their values, where the investment's just the end of that process, not the start. And from the risk point of view, sorry, just to cover off that other thing, is the risk is twofold. One, to use a vertical word, is lack of choice. As soon as you don't give advisors choice, they'll leave. Fair enough, so they should. And the second element is really comes around to, do you have the best solutions? Can you put your hand on your heart and say, are you delivering the best for your clients and for your advisors? And if you're not doing that because you have your in-house solution, that's a risk.
Yeah. So what does best execution look like? I mean, how do you know whether, in fact, you're actually delivering something that represents, best execution that keeps advisors bonded?
Yeah. So I think one thing is we've mapped out on clients. So what do clients need by each particular? They want simple solutions through to complex solutions, right? And then we look at the firms and think, well, the firms, want to use simple solutions through to complex solutions. And we've mapped all our APL into those different segments. And so we recognise there's an element of clients who want a low-cost solution, simple solution, don't want ongoing management, and the firm sees that. Industry fund, that's fine. And we need to line up according to that. And where we need to hold ourselves to account is when an advisor says, no, we don't like you for that. That's actually good feedback, because if we're not delivering to the standards we set ourselves, then why should we?
Yeah. And so do you must have sort of regular engagement with the regulator. And so in that engagement, Do they raise this issue of how do they assess execution quality and the risks for investors?
Great question. And I'd argue they hold firms with in-house investment solutions to a high standard when around the advice delivery.
Yep.
And so for us, like many in the room, they looked at files, and where there is a risk is when the advisor uses an in-house solution but doesn't explain why. And not saying that's a problem for us, but that's where ASIC was looking. And so why they choose that solution over another solution on your approved product list. And if that's not clear, and how you make that clear is being sure the advisor's really bought into your philosophy and your approach. If that's not clear in the SOA or the documents, then it's a risk. Yep.
Yeah. Now, we've seen licensees buy advice practices. I mean, Count has recently with Oracle and others. In some ways heading towards a salaried model. I mean, I spent time in Shadforth, so I get that model. Do you think this model, salaried advice, is going to become more common compared to the outsourced IFA, self-licensed?
Look, I think, putting Count aside, I think it will grow, okay, and I think it should grow, because with the right firms training advisors, it'll help see the industry with the next generation of advisors, all right? And that could be industry funds, it could be whoever. For us, being in advice, we see the opportunity with the work we do is to participate in the advice margin. But we're leaning more to the equity partnership model as opposed to the salary model because we want to partner with entrepreneurs. You know? And so we believe we deliver the expertise in advice delivery and insights and business growth initiatives and so forth, but we want the entrepreneurs to stay in the business and run the business.
Yeah, my recollection of Shadforth was that was exactly the problem, which is the people who are happy to take our salary plus revenue share, bonus, often look over the fence and go, hey, if this was my business, I could do better.
Yep. Yeah. I do think the salaried model will be something that's going to grow quite materially over the next few years, though, and not to the detriment of the independent model, but alongside it. I think you're going to find a lot of the big financial services companies, the banks in particular, will be back into advice in a whole range of different ways over the next few years. And I think there's a lot of private equity money looking to deploy, and they really like the idea of the salaried model. Whether they fully understand it yet is another thing, but it's coming back.
Yeah, I think this issue, you've touched on private equity. The issue of capital is one that I thought we might spend a minute or two thinking about, whether in fact the need for capital as underpinning the advice business is, whether we are moving towards a more capital-intensive industry.
Yeah, I think it's definitely relevant, and finding where any particular advice business model sits on that, what level of capital do you need over the next 3 to 5 years, is going to be a really important question. I think we'll touch on a few of these topics, and we certainly talked about them today, of what level of change, what level of technology investment does your particular advice model require over the next few years? Some people are going to say not much, others are going to say actually it's a whole heap.
Well, we saw Michael Bova earlier on going, hey, I had to hire a CTO, and that
Correct.
was when he probably had maybe 10 staff.
Exactly.
Now, in terms of questions, I mean, we've generally left questions to the end, but I think in this case, because we're going to traverse quite a bit of, if there are questions that occur to you as we go, put your hand up, and Stephen, who's got the microphone, will run around, and we'll take the questions as we go, rather than storing them up for the end. So look, so Glenn, you come from the sort of product and platform background. I mean, do you have observations, on vertical integration and as much as anything else on the product issuers, but heading to
Yeah, I think it's a really important question to understand, and what does that mean for advice providers? I think asset managers, platform operators, they're all looking to understand what does the world look like in that 3 to 5 year time frame, and what does that mean for a corporatised business? They're wanting to see where's the margin moving, where's volume moving, and I think you'll find all of them are thinking about which business should I be in and which shouldn't I be in, and how that's going to change over time.
When we saw Chris Bricky speaking earlier on, I mean, he's built one of the more successful direct-to-consumer business models, 21,000 clients.
Yes, correct.
Now, still only $1 billion.
But I think even for a business like Chris's, largely they're a product issuer. I'd be very surprised if businesses aren't thinking about advice and how does that actually work. Now, that could be a challenge for traditional advice providers, but also an opportunity. I think what you're going to find is there's going to be a lot of these sorts of propositions that are actually going to stimulate demand. They'll be working with a relatively simple proposition with people, starting to engage them on advice, and we're already seeing a whole range of tools, and I'm sure you guys have all got clients that have used Claude for a couple of hours before they come to your advice meeting, and so that makes for a really interesting conversation when they think they've been advised, and now you actually have to unpick that. But that is a great opportunity to show the value out of personal advice, and I think we're going to see, in my mind, a whole lot more advice being delivered, not just the traditional form.
I think
that will create opportunities and challenges.
One of the things I read was, I forget now, but relatively recently, somebody who said, look, every client takes their SOA, takes it home, scans it, says to Claude, what do you think?
Correct.
Either
after the meeting or before the meeting. Yeah. So you've got kind of both going on at the moment.
Yeah.
So.
Martin, yeah.
One of the interesting sort of discussions around AI is the ability to have personal advice for a higher wealth client and find a way to capture the next generation coming through. The reality is that's a scale game. And most IFAs and small business owners don't have the time, the effort, the money, the bandwidth to get the clients. It's all right having the infrastructure. It's great having a website. You've got firms that are like Open Invest that are offering opportunity for low-value clients to come in. You've got to capture them. And this market's not that huge. Have you got any views on how IFAs would actually do that, or small business owners?
Well, that's
I'm going to take that one
straight
first.
into what was going to be our next question. So, Simon.
Yeah, look, within Count, the advisors we see, they've got too many clients, so they're turning them away. I don't have a clear answer to your question because we're finding organic demand from clients, and referrals is growing and growing and growing. The problem we have is how do we seed a new advisor to take those newer clients, or maybe the more junior clients. So that's kind of the problem we're solving for through PY investments and so forth. Yeah.
And then there's the question of consolidation, between and amongst clients. So not just the acquisition model, but the joining together of separate practices. Do you see that becoming more common?
Yeah, happy to chat to that one. We had a great case study in one of the earlier presentations. I think it is a thematic, and it might be a little bit about your own strategic planning as well. It's like, where are you on that journey? Are you acquiring and adding to your business? Are you looking to be selling your business at some point in the future, or are you just happy where you are? But I think a lot of that analysis will actually bring you back to, what am I doing around data and data governance systems? Do I have the right people in my practice for the next 3 to 5 years? Because this question of bringing together different client bases, bringing together new clients, different behaviour sets, I do think there's a slight segue, your question about how does a traditional advice firm engage there. You've got to get comfortable in dealing with clients where they've come to you with almost 2/3 of their advice situation already worked out. Some of it good, some of it probably really quite problematic because they've been doing it themselves. How do you pick them up and incorporate those other services? And the way you're going to do that is to have a good data architecture in your business where you can bring someone on cost effectively and then move them to your advice model. So it's probably not a popular thing, but that element of data systems is going to be increasingly important for people because more automation is coming to advice.
Because the people who've got the big technology budgets are the platforms. So in a sense, the people who could facilitate this, because they've got the technology, also they have quite a lot, but not all of the data.
Correct.
Other platforms. Do you see them?
Yeah, I think all the platforms have aspirations in those areas. Whether they can execute on it well, we'll sort of see play out. And I think your decision making around who you partner with and how flexible you are as a business to be able to change partners over time will be quite important going forward. Certainly, if you put yourself in the shoes of running a big platform, what are they looking to try and do? Where's my future growth coming from? Where are my margins coming from? And they're all looking to provide additional services to advisors. You know, are they going to be successful at doing that? Well, we'll wait and see. But it is going to be particularly relevant for this group. But also, I think there's increasingly opportunities for you to be doing more yourself. Leveraging the data from the platforms and other partners, but actually aggregating your own data, performing analytics, starting to use some of these AI models to actually drive out cost and efficiency. I had a great anecdote, actually, it'd be interesting to test with the room. I was chatting with someone who is involved in consolidation at the moment, and they said, the quickest and biggest kind of return on automation at the moment is digital file notes and running an efficient managed account program. And that gives you about 80% of your step change in bringing a firm on. I know it sounds a bit trivial, but that's a great basis. You're getting that data collection and then you're getting the scale efficiencies of running managed accounts.
Simon, from Count's point of view, without disclosing kind of confidential things, where do you try to gain the sort of synergies from acquisition or partnership?
Yeah, so a lot of it is technology. So all the firms in our network, their number one issue is technology and efficiency. So that we see that, to Glenn's point, is a handbrake on growth. So when we do acquire what we call tuck-ins, so we'll buy a business one of our subsidiaries will acquire another business. First thing is really around alignment of systems and processes and so forth. And when I joined Count, probably nearly 6 years ago, we had 3 firms with over $1 million. Now we have more than 40. So it's something we've been able to finesse over time and get better and better. But there's still more to do. And without mentioning names, one of the larger advice delivery platforms.
Yeah. I was wondering how we were not going to them. Yeah.
It is still seen as a major handbrake. And so we're getting a lot of demand from advisors going, I want to go down this path, help me, support me, using AI, using external tools.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that because, that is something you hear. I mean, again, I go back to Shadforth. My recollection is we maintained an in-house team in Hobart of 12 people to support, I can't remember, 100 advisors or something. And that was just for planning software.
Yeah.
They're probably all gone now. But so do you see Count becoming more active in making that technology available and sort of purpose designed for?
Yeah, probably less so building ourselves because we don't have the capital budget. But where we see our focus is really around how do we integrate. And so if there's a tool out there, so now we've got firms and network use about 6 different advice tools, advice delivery or creation tools. How do we really make sure the integration of that tool works with different CRMs, practice management platforms, you name it. So that's where we focus our efforts, but also around the governance and security issues as well.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, I mean, that's the downside of feeding your SOA into Claude, isn't it?
Yeah.
You need to know where the data goes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So look, let's go back to the sessions that we had on the platforms and the pressure that they're under. Back to Francie's session and James Lowe referenced it as well. I mean, how do you see the platforms responding to the pressures that ASIC and APRA are bringing to bear, both informal and formal.
Yeah, well, I think you heard it here today. It's very front of mind for the platforms, and Simon and I were actually just chatting about this. I think there's two elements to it as well. One is the regulatory pressure, and the other one that people may not appreciate in the room is the operational pressure of having many investment programs running on your platform, many assets. And I think they're finding that double whammy of the regulators holding me to account to this, and it's costly and hard to manage. I think we're going to see them want to actually reduce investment access and reduce the number of asset consultants they're working with. That would be my read on it. How that plays out as far as competition and pricing will be really interesting. But I think less access to platforms is what we'll see over the next couple of years.
Less access to platforms or less access to options within platforms?
Well, so yeah, I'm trying to think from the asset consultants frame or the advisors frame. You're actually going to be seeing the ability to get new programs on starting to be constrained.
I think there's a mindset shift going on, not just within the platforms, but with the broader advisor network. And completely agree with Glenn's point. So even our experience is the due diligence process has gone up enormously, and so it should. So we're quite happy to go through that. I have seen over the years some managed accounts on some platforms where you go, how on earth did that get on there? Yep. And so where I see a shift is where platforms are going to tighten right up. And maybe they say to that manager or that firm, you know what, we want you to go with an MDA on your licence, not an SMA on our platform.
Yeah. Yep.
And I see that as a potential shift coming.
I've had one advisor whose SMA program's been running for a while, and it hasn't gone as well as they would have liked. Turn around and go, well, we better close this because I want to start again from ground zero. I do not want to carry the baggage. Yep. And so I can see that being both adopted by the portfolio managers and by the platforms going, let's start again. But
yeah, I think that's right. The other thing that I sometimes find really useful is to compare different geographies and where their regulator is heading. So I'm not sure whether people are following, but the UK regulator is heading in a really interesting direction, which I think will be directly relevant here, which is they're starting to move, really moving the settings where the advice firms are being judged on outcomes. So rather than, I'm just going to have a charging structure, which is, you're on an annual retainer, they actually are trying to frame things on, you're going to provide advice around events or outcomes, and you'll basically document on those bases. So I think you're going to see a shift from the regulator in that direction, which is starting to feed into the higher end UK advice firms where their pricing structures are also shifting to much more event-based rather than the simple retainer structure.
So explain what that actually means.
Well, I think there's an overarching sort of annual regime around review charging structures, which we've all become quite comfortable with, and we think that's the status quo. I think that we are seeing regulators in other countries actually say, well, that's not really relevant. Like, are you delivering value? What's the complexity that you're managing as an advisor, and how you're charging for that is the simple framing.
So you mean a more event-based approach, which says...
What have you done for the client this year? How much complexity are you actually dealing with? Are you addressing tax requirements, structuring requirements, or are you just managing a simple program?
That would tend to drive people to a much more wealth management-based outcome rather than an advice-based outcome, wouldn't it?
No, I think it's actually...
I manage this money and...
I think it's the reverse is what we're kind of seeing.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions as we go? Yeah, Rob, yeah. We love people who ask questions.
Yeah, Toby, I'm probably jumping the gun a bit here, mate, because you've probably got next question down on next to the list. But you guys have covered off that you think there might be a bit of a drift toward the employee side of things. I think there's no doubt there's a drift to become self-licensed. And I think, of course, the IFA sector should remain pretty much strong. The one area I'd like you two guys to comment on is the one problem that the whole industry's got more than any, and that's new entrants.
Sorry, that is
New entrants.
New entrants, yeah.
shortage of? Or
What are we going to do, right? We've talked about lower education standards. We've talked about this new kind of advisor. We've talked about, we've got a number of PYs. I've got 6 in my group, but that's not good enough. We need another 5,000 advisors, 10,000 advisors for sure. What are your thoughts on that?
Great question. So we have an ambition to double our PYs next year. So we've got 50, and we want to go to 100. But the overarching settings are wrong. We're lucky one of our investment committees, Mark Brimble, sits on as part of Griffith University, and they're thinking about at the university level is how do you make financial advice more attractive as a course, and then as an industry. I think the growing scale we talked about before in firms, I think is a good thing because as bigger firms, they have better capital and revenue to seed new planners in. And I think that's going to be important, but how, for those who partner with the licensee, how do we support them and accelerate that learning curve for them? So that's where we're putting our efforts.
Yeah, it's always seemed to me that advice is one of those things which is a follow-on profession. Michael Bova said that, right in the very first session, which is he was working for whoever it was, EY or KPMG or whatever as an accountant and decided that he'd rather slit his wrists. Became an advisor. It seems to me that, not many 18-year-olds front up at university and go, hey, what I'd like to be as a financial planner.
Yeah.
They do a more general course and discover planning, and that our current educational framework really does not support that.
Yeah, I think that's a constraint. It's a really hard problem to solve. I think that's probably the obvious thing to say. I always sort of believe in the market system and what has to change to make it more attractive for people to want to work in the space. Well, they probably need to be paid more. It needs to be easier to get in, is what your point is, and the work needs to be enjoyable. Well, I think we're on a direction of travel where a lot of the administration work is going to be taken out of the advice process. We're sort of seeing that level of automation come through. So that's one element. Really on the opportunity for the regulator to improve and streamline and find more pathways. I think hopefully they'll listen to that and make that work. And then I think the economic models, it's really then for people in this room and the broader advice profession to actually find those economic models that are going to make it attractive to run more junior level advice opportunities. I think it sounds like Count's definitely exploring it.
Yeah, look, I think the SOA process is a bit of a chore, right?
Yeah.
And so the client engagement joy out of being an advisor is often lost, particularly if you're learning and just sitting in a particular advice software. So I think with AI and the new tools coming out, the client engagement process is far more interactive, enjoyable. That's, I think, is going to help it.
You're spending more time with the client and less time on the admin. I know that's a bit of a cliche, but it is genuinely happening now.
Yeah. Now we've touched several times in this session and previously on performance tests, but let's talk about performance tests. I mean, if APRA or an ASIC imposed formally or informally, and you don't want to discount the informal pressure, performance tests on platforms. How do you think that would play out for advice practices and asset consultants?
I'll kick it off. Numerous levels, and probably uncomfortably in some corners too. But I think it's going to come. So I think, I'm okay with it. So where it'll play out is firms who partner with asset consultants, where they're not delivering as well as as potentially they could be, or they're at risk of breaching the performance tests. That can be an uncomfortable conversation. What's going to happen with that asset consultant and that arrangement? Same for businesses like ours with our own portfolios. If they're not delivering, that's uncomfortable too. Yeah. And so I think it's going to force a more forensic look, hopefully in the right direction with the right benchmarks at portfolio performance. And businesses will just have to make sure we're nimble and support alternative options.
But do we also run the risk that it just means, payday for BlackRock, Beta Shares, Vanguard, State Street, which is hey, market-linked portfolios.
Hopefully
There
not.
is certainly one set of scenarios there where everybody becomes very risk adverse and just wants to, pick up that few benchmark portfolios, and that's really all they want to deal with. That's one scenario. It's going to get pretty bland if that happens. What other options do you see?
It's all about the benchmarks, right? And I think I don't have the answer, but if they have the right set of benchmarks, and perhaps it links to what the client's risk profile, what does the client want? And if there is some ability to blend the two, because not all client wants a passive portfolio.
Yep.
If there's some way you can capture that in the overall performance testing to align the portfolios with the client outcome or preference, that could work.
Yeah. Julie Ballard's in the room from S&P. We've been doing a lot of work in IMAP with S&P on developing benchmarks. We have got the prototype benchmark as part of the awards process this year for a set of managed account benchmarks.
Yep. I think that'll be quite relevant. I think the other thing that seems to be missing, and it's a very complicated conversation to bring in, but often people are seeking advice because they've got existing assets and existing exposures. A simple benchmark, how does that work with, I was a business owner, I've got existing property assets. How does that all come together in a simple benchmark that a regulator can look at? I think that's got to be considered when this sort of plays through.
Yeah. Look, I agree. I think that the ability to be able to say I recommended this investment outcome because it most closely aligned to what I understand your goals to be and your constraints, the property that you won't sell or
correct,
whatever it might be. I'd like to think that technology will make it easier for an advisor to align, a client-specific benchmark or a client-specific objective, quantified objective, with the client's circumstances.